Welcome to the CrossExam. Today we are joined by Paulo Casaca, the founder of the South Asia Democratic Forum and former member of European Parliament. Uh, Mr. Casaca is a long-time advocate for democracy, accountability, minority rights in South Asia. He has written extensively on Bangladesh political challenges and the threat of religious fanaticism and the risk of opaque development finance. Mr. Kasaka, thank you for joining us today. So, for our first questions, Mr. Kasaka, you have a diverse career as an economist, a politician, and a founder of several think tanks. What experiences draw you towards South Asia and the causes of democracy and human rights?
Well, good morning to you. Well, here we are already in the evening, and thank you so much for this invitation. I'm really delighted to be discussing these issues with you. You know, India, the European Parliament, when I came I had been, in the regional Assembly of the Azores, which is an autonomous region of Portugal. I had been in the Portuguese Parliament, and the European Parliament was for me, an opening to the rest of the world, more than Europe. I mean, I was looking at Europe when I was in the national or the regional arena, and India was actually one of the countries I got more interested in when I was in the European Parliament. I was a member of the delegation for relations with India. I was as well very much involved in the Middle East, and especially on issues regarding Iran. The actually an autobiographic book I wrote in 2008 is The Hidden Invasion of Iraq. I mean, it's centered on Iraq, and my experiences on Iraq really influenced me a lot. But, for a matter of opportunity, I dedicated myself after I left the European Parliament to the issue of South Asia. And I learned a lot. I mean, I had already my ideas more or less consolidated, but I learned a lot on South Asia. South Asia is perhaps the region in the world that is less taken into account in relation to its real importance. To start with, it's the biggest in human terms. I mean, it's the most populated. Sometimes people say, "Oh no, it's not the biggest." Looking at the area, I mean, area is not the main criteria. The human dimension is obviously the main criteria, and South Asia is the biggest in the world, and a lot, or I would say everything that is important to everyone in the world, in Europe and elsewhere, is very acute in South Asia. But during these 15 years, I fundamentally learned a lot. And I think that within Europe, I have, a better understanding of countries, well, like Bangladesh. Bangladesh was perhaps the country I got more involved in for a variety of circumstances that, come from the childhood, if you want. It's one of the things that most influenced my childhood was actually the independence of Bangladesh and what it came with a pop culture, but sometimes that's the way people get sensibilized to situations. And actually I think I did learn a lot. I dedicate a lot of my efforts for the relations with Bangladesh, well, with Afghanistan as well, was a second most important issue within South Asia, and especially the issue of the genocide, the justice on genocide, the geopolitics of it. I mean, everything is there, and actually, one of the things that I mostly concluded, that I think presently is when we slice the reality into fields like geopolitics, political system versus democracy, human rights or humanity, including minorities, religious extremism, to use the expressions that are mostly used in nowadays, or if you want, ideologies. When we slice all that, sometimes we lost the perspective. We lose the perspective. We fail to understand the global dimension of the issues. Well, South Asia, the biggest, of course, the modern South Asia was very much influenced by its biggest and latest colonizer, the United Kingdom, and the way it went away. And the way that their South Asia would also include Burma, Myanmar, because it made part of the British Empire. And of course, the issue of the partition was the biggest drama and factor in building the present South Asia. And well, for instance, in this partition, there was very popular, mostly in the United Kingdom, but also in the United States, view that, well, the Indian leadership was not trustworthy. It was suspected to be close, or to run the risk of getting close to the Soviet Union. So it would be necessary to have a block for not allowing the Soviet Union to reach the warm seas. That's the terminology of the time, of the 40s. The warm seas was the Indic and Pacific. But and so, if you created a complex of buffer states, mostly, the so-called Muslim part of India, Pakistan at the time, East and West Pakistan, and in the middle you had Nepal, is not Muslim, and but had a history of being close to the West, to a significant history being close to the United Kingdom. While you have broadly, the chicken's neck, and not very much more than this. And this idea, that was the geopolitics of the time. It is a preposterous idea from any point of view, and it is a good example of why we cannot look at things, just from specific angle.
Okay, so with that in topic, like you mentioned about Nepal, and we all know what's happening in Nepal right now. Nepal is a non-Muslim country. It's not necessarily due to religion, or not necessarily due to corruption that we know of happening there, because it was not really known to the world that there is a lot of corruption happening in Nepal. How it was started is because government wanted to have some regulation on social media. And so even in Canada, we do have regulation on social media. We're not allowed to post any news content on social media, but we do not go out on the street and start a protest that our freedom of speech is taken away. So all the end of the day, they are software companies too. Those Facebook, Instagram, they all run and operate in Nepal. The Nepalese government wanted to have some regulation so that this media can be controlled in a way that it helps with their revenue. So they pay some money to the government. They open their offices in Nepal. What happened, after that, the youth, they took over the street. They were intrigued by some influence, some NGOs and some other so-called human rights organization to burn down the parliament, kill the prime minister's wife and some other ministers. And the entire country is burning now. How do you see this? What's happening in South Asia?
Well, you see, to start with, I think that there is a malaise, the French expression. I think that it's also used in English, not only in South Asia, but a bit all over the world,
All over
with
the
the
world.
way that the democracy is working. You know, in its essence, this movement, there is a a popular discontent, a perception of corruption, and I'm sure there is corruption in Nepal, as there was and there is in Bangladesh for sure. The dimension of it, I mean, it's more difficult to assess. And it's not only the dimension of the corruption, because you might corrupt yourself in a more sophisticated ways, more legal ways, in a country that is more developed, and the substance is not really very different from what happens in a less developed country. You see, if you look at France, for instance, you will see phenomena, of course, not with this level of violence, but I think the nature,
Nature is
in
saying,
its essence, it's very likely. It's very likely. I mean, there was a popular discontent in Bangladesh as well. I mean, I was there in
yeah,
January 2024, and I could see it. Um, I mean, one thing is to see this popular discontent. Another thing is to say, well, Bangladesh was a dictatorship, which is nonsense. It was not. It
no,
is now. It
yeah,
is quite a dictatorship now. It was not then,
yeah.
but there was a discontent because for reasons that do not necessarily have to do, or are not the fault, or only the fault of the authorities. Actually, there was this sense that you could not change the government because the main opposition was actually directed by a convicted terrorist from London. I mean, it's very difficult to make this as a democratic alternative. It's impossible. And actually, they boycotted the election. So I mean, there is in Nepal, as in many other places, I'm sure there is a popular discontent. Actually, I think that countries like Canada, United Kingdom, and the European Union, we are playing with fire regarding this issue of the social media. Because we have more and more initiatives that are very restrictive and that are very repressive of the way that people are engaged in social media. And we have to be very careful with this. Otherwise, I mean, I do not know the details, but you are right regarding the issue of revenue. One of the things that people did not understand is that the press, during many decades, lived mostly not on the publicity. And of course, when it was not publicity, it was selling a newspaper, a physical newspaper or something that you could physically control. But both things are gone, and actually, who gets the publicity revenue are these giants of the information technology, like Google and Facebook and so on. They are the ones who get the money. And so, one of the reasons why there is no free press, well, there is, of course, there is some free press, but there is a big crisis in the free press, and the decline is that the model is not there any longer. I mean, they do not have the revenue to subsist independently. That's a
Like,
very big problem.
thank you for pointing that out. Not many people actually consider that. Like even the situation in France, like the press they are getting, the number of hits Facebook, Instagram, and all of those social media they are getting, there is direct revenue involved. Like how they are going to see in rise in number of users is equivalent to the money they make end of the day. So similar things happened. Like I'm just gonna go back to Nepal for a second again, because there are a lot of audiences there are actually. I made a video a few days ago about the situation in Nepal when it was just rolling out, that warning people that this is exactly what happened in Bangladesh. People, be aware, like just observe and see what's happening. So social media was banned. Government lifted the ban too after 24 hours after the incident happened. And I was talking to some Nepalese people, and they were like, "Oh, situation is under control and everything's gonna be okay." I'm like, "Be aware, like just see what happened in Bangladesh." Because after Sheikh Hasina resigned and went to India, country was still burning for another 5 days. Continued to burn. They were burning the metro, rail station, TV station, like houses after houses, parliament, even historical places. Same situation happened in Nepal. The youths, yes, government, prime minister resigned. Prime minister resigned. Prime minister flew the country. Still, they continued to burn the country. If you watch the videos now, it's like worse situation than even Gaza right now. So I would like your opinion here. Like, who do you think behind all of this? And I understand it is very difficult question to answer, to point out at someone or certain someone, but whose interest in all of this? Like in South Asia, especially when you are saying that they considering the human, that's probably the biggest population and human resource wise, that's probably the most important place in the world right now.
Well, you see, of course, there are common elements between what is happening in Nepal and what happened in Bangladesh. Actually, in Nepal, as far as I know, there is not yet a solution for the transitional government, and I think this is absolutely urgent. Of course, that this will decide a lot of what will be next. As you are saying, I mean. I am afraid that there is some organization in Nepal that is not really looking for a peaceful and democratic future of the country. I fear, but I cannot say. I do not have a strong opinion on this. On Bangladesh, I'm sure. I mean, when I got out in January 2024. I mean, before that, I mean, I saw in the European Parliament the lobby, the so-called Qatar Gate. One of the main targets of the Qatar Gate was to tarnish the image of Bangladesh authorities and saying, "Oh, it is a terrible dictatorship. They are really putting all the opponents in prison." And so a lot of rubbish. Well, on the internet as well, there was a big campaign organized from the United States saying, "Oh, the dictatorship in social media is absolutely terrible," so on, so on, so on, so on. I mean, I'm not saying that the Bangladesh authorities had the perfect regime, but I mean, come on, we just have to compare it with the present situation. It's obviously much worse. No one with a bit of objectivity can deny this fact. The situation of freedom, democracy, human rights is incomparably worse in our day in Bangladesh than it was with Sheikh Hasina. That's objective. And whoever says the contrary or does not know what he is saying, or it's not being honest. It's as simple as that. So getting back to the issue, I saw the jihadi, the jihadi organization of the coup. For me, it was obvious, and it came from the day that Sheikh Hasina decided to go ahead with the punishment of the surviving leaders of the genocide of 71. That came from this. At this time, the Islamist networks, the Muslim Brotherhood to start with, that is in close connection with Jamaat-e Islam, although there is not a common organization between the two, the Islamists, the Islam extremism decided to topple Sheikh Hasina, whatever it would take. And it made a lot of influence within the European Union and United States. It really penetrated. I actually have a text in French on this where I use the expression of of a capture. actually the jihadism captured full instances of the Western power. Well, the case of US ad is very obvious, very known, but it's not at all the only one. I mean, if it would only be for US ad, things would have not been done the way they were. So, this is another side of the problem. That the biggest weakness of the West is actually money. It's very easy to influence decision makers in the West with money. Well, the West, not only the West, of course, but the West as well. And this is not been seen. When the Bangladesh coup took place, I saw a lot of analysis saying, oh, we don't, the geopolitics. Well, the geopolitics. From the American side, what was the interest of putting an Islamist pro-Chinese government in Bangladesh? I mean, absolutely zero. There is no interest for the United States or for the European Union to do that, of course, as countries. But for those who were in the networks of influence, who have some business with Qatar, for instance, the George Soros empire, this very opaque construction that ridiculously claims to finance transparency all over the world, but it's the least transparent construction I know of. It has very, very close relations with Qatar, and this Soros construction was one of the main instruments in promoting. I mean, it's in Qatar Gates, it's the main instrument, and in other ways to promote the coup in Bangladesh. And the reason is money for the people who do it, not for the country. As a country, the United States, and that's a question that I think one has to put very clearly very rationally to political decision makers in the European Union and in the United States. I mean, tell us, what did you gain out of the coup in Bangladesh? I mean, there was a lot of theatrics on the issue of Myanmar. Most of it, I think, it's completely disinformation. I mean, nothing makes sense of what has been said there. I mean, Myanmar is another big disaster for sure. But I mean, it's it's the Rohingya. But I mean, the Rohingya are now the main enemies of the Arakan army. So the corridor for the Arakan army to help the Rohingya doesn't make sense. I mean, I think that there is a lot of of disinformation that is thrown into the public opinion for people not to see what is the reality. And the reality is that you have important people located in important places that are corrupted by money to do things that are contrary to the interests of their countries. As simple as that. Not all are corrupted. A lot are just idiots. And others, are just following, historical trends, because in 71, Bangladesh was the Soviet, within the Soviet strategy. So the enemies, and so now, over 50 years after, it should be the same. It makes no sense. Absolutely makes no sense. Actually, I mean, even Sheikh Hasina believed that having a closer relation with Russia would help her. It could not, because Russia does not have the capability. Russia is a big power, nuclear power, yes. Otherwise, forget about it. Some oil, some gas, okay. There are others in the market, but otherwise, it's not a power.
So Russia, sorry for interruption. Russia did warn Bangladesh in 2023 December. If you are their embassy actually even publicly tweeted about that too. Even that there is a conspiracy going on against Bangladesh, and you were there in 2024 January. You said so. You have seen the situation in Bangladesh, and you can compare now very well.
Yeah, I mean, I did. I did warn the Bangladesh authorities directly, privately, before December 2023 that the conspiracy was ongoing. And I saw it through SADF, you see, because it started at least in 2019. There is a disinformation agency called EU Disinfo Lab that I wrote extensively about it. But they are fundamentally connected to this George Soros empire, and they have a lot of penetration within the US deep state. And they targeted us for our work on Bangladesh and for our work on jihadism. They were completely, I mean, the way that they were absolutely enraged with what I think was perhaps the most important book that SADF was involved in, which was on terrorism revisited, with a lot of contributions and really big insight. For me, it's very clear. I mean, at least from this time, it was clear to me that the plot was going, and the target, at least from 2019, and I saw it everywhere.
So within that topic, like I interviewed Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, like who was the longest time Prime Minister of Malaysia. And also recently, a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed Dr. Shirin Ebadi. She is the Nobel laureate from Iran. You're probably familiar with her work as well. She's a human rights activist currently in the UK. So both of them, they pointed out about the religion. They are Muslims, both of them, but they do not agree with the extremism and how the Islam is being weaponized. And in your writing, or what you have said, that the Iranian revolution and the collapse of the Soviet Union influenced your views on extremism and democracy, how you see this. Like, how did those events, I'm just trying to understand, like, how did those events shape your work and your views currently, what you believe in?
Well, you see, I think that communism as an ideology is dead. It's absolutely dead. When I see some conservatives seeing, the jihadism as being, a Marxist sort of ideology, it's nonsense. I mean, it's absolutely dead. And jihadism, which I did write extensively on the issue. In my opinion, of course, Islam is a religion like any other. I do not at all think that there is a peculiar, that it is more prone to violence than any other, and the evidence is there. I mean, in history and even in contemporary times. I mean, I don't believe it, but there was from the colonial India. I mean, I think the colonial India was more important than the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. The Jamaati Islam was perhaps and its founder was perhaps the most important ideological construction on what I call the modern jihadism, which is this idea that this sort of Islam, radical Islam, shall be imposed all over the world. And this is the only thing that matters. I mean, the logic is very similar to the one of communism. It's to a certain extent it is copied, but it is totalitarian, and it really is something that, for the first time, took power in Iran. I mean, the theocracy in Iran, this ideology, and people tend to think, oh, Sunnism and Shiism is so different. Of course, there are differences. I mean, Islam is a very complex religion. I mean, like Christianity. I mean, if you speak about Christianity, I mean, so many different things there. And Islam is the same thing. But of course, the the most important thing is not between Sunnis and Shias. The extremist and totalitarian Sunnis and Shias, they can get together very well. I mean, and they did. Ayatollah Khomeini actually met Maududi, who is the creator of Jamaat-e-Islam, in Mecca, and a lot of the doctrine passed from one to the other, and he had very good relations with the Muslim Brotherhood as well. Of course, that does not mean that they might be shooting at each other in certain circumstances, but there is, as communists as well, you had big quarrels among communists, but this ideology became really the most dangerous one on the world level. Shirin Ebadi, I mean, I met her in the European Parliament. I think she is a very interesting person, very, very cultivated, and she really understands a lot of the issue. And to a certain degree, I mean, I agree with her. But, I think that sometimes people tend to separate, the Iranian theocracy and their, fanaticism from the one of Bin Laden and from the one of Afghanistan and from the one of Pakistan, which is very important as well. And of course, the differences exist. That's no question about that. But fundamentally, it's the same ideology, and in certain circumstances, they are able to come together and to work together. And most importantly, they are able to use. They are very good in terms of disinformation techniques and actually maneuvering within the West. Well, Qatar is really the best example of this. I mean, it's unbelievable how this tiny country was able to have the Taliban, to have the most important presence, American presence, and at the same time the Taliban. Well, now of course it's Hamas and so on and so on. I mean, actually, whoever in the Islamic fanaticism universe, whoever is important, you will find a connection with Qatar. They are really the big center.
There's big wild money there that is influencing the geopolitics. So one example I just want to point out, there are two Nobel Peace Prize winners side by side in two countries, one in Bangladesh, another one in Myanmar. Aung San Suu Kyi is a Nobel Peace Prize winner, another Dr. Muhammad Yunus, another Nobel Peace Prize winner, running two countries now. But that's probably the worst place right now when it comes to peace in the world. Why is that? What is their intention or lack of understanding? Or we understand his policies about NGOs and also his work in economics. That's basically the microcredit, that what he did. How does that qualify him to run a country that is so disastrous now under his regime, last 15 months?
Well, you see, one of the things I did lately was to consult the procedure of the nomination and actually the attribution of the Nobel Peace Prize to the bank and to the manager of the bank, in 2006. And I mean, I could not believe it, because actually professionally I'm an economist, and the latest book I wrote was on money, on the issue of money. The issue of credit is something, I mean, I have some ideas about it, and I was absolutely flabbergasted. I mean, I could not believe when I saw that the people who wrote the nomination process, they do not have a clue of what they are speaking about, because of course that Mr. Yunus did not invent microcredit. I mean, microcredit has existed for thousands of years, at least.
That's
And
it.
no collateral. He is a banker, and he is one of the most strict bankers. That is really looking at the. He's an usury. I mean,
You can call him successful banker too, because he's operating in many different countries now, like including United States even.
You are speaking about, sorry?
Dr. Yunus, his bank is operating in many different countries. So he's probably a successful banker, not really a successful politician.
Absolutely. I mean, he is a banker. I think that, in the present coalition in Bangladesh, it's a coalition between the banker that really only cares with money and the religious extremists, especially Jamaat-e-Islam, that is obviously the big and powerful motor of all the events that led to the fall of Sheikh Hasina, and that is more and more obviously controlling the country. You just have to see now the elections, the so-called elections, in the University of Dhaka. It's all very obvious, who is controlling the shots is very obvious. It's Jamaat-e-Islam that is the most powerful, the most classic Islamic extremist organization in the whole of South Asia. That's it. Yunus is there only for the money. That's what I think, and he will. He is he is a financial. He just looks at the banking side of the issue. He couldn't care less with the rest. I mean, and of course, he never believed in democracy. I mean, you just have to see his life, his positions. I mean, did he ever run for office? Never. I mean, how comes that someone who gets in the interim position says he's going to reform and then perhaps allow elections? I mean, that's the vocabulary of dictators everywhere in the world. Always in history, it was like that. There are two types of approaches. Those who say, I'm going to organize elections so that there might be reforms getting out of the elections, because of the popular support. And those who say, no. People, we cannot trust people to do whatever. I am doing the things, and then when things are done, you just have to say, look, see if you agree or not. A referendum. There was all dictatorships had some sort of referendum. In Portugal, it was the same thing. First you have the dictatorship, and then you get some sort of referendum. So Sorry.
It is the same pattern of a dictatorship. That's what you were saying. So
Absolutely.
Even with his work, I actually can relate to when you say it's about money, because the soon as he took over power, first thing he did is basically he owed like $60 to $70 million as tax money to the government. First thing he did when he came to power is basically not to pay that. So he made sure the government pardoned him from paying these taxes, and that continued. So I would like to go back a little bit. I read some of your writing in 2015. I think it was 2015 article. You described impunity for the 1971 genocide in Bangladesh as original sin, and how has that unresolved legacy shaped the country's policies now? And has this international crime tribunal, because you mentioned about Sheikh Hasina trying to punish the people who actually did that genocide and killed 3 million people, which is one of the largest population we lost after Second World War in the world, if you consider a war. And the tribunal Sheikh Hasina used, it was, in our understanding, an international standard. And the same tribunal is now being used to punish the political leaders who are accused to do war crimes or genocide. How do you see that? How do you explain that? Why did you call it original sin? I'm trying to understand your perspective on that.
Well, I have to confess that in 2015 I wrote several things, on the issue of the genocide and well, the original sin fundamentally from the West, because through Kissinger, and Kissinger is really a very black spot in the West, in the United States, but I remember a very good American political scientist that whenever I said, American Kissinger, said, well, precisely, he's European. And that's true. He was born in Europe, Kissinger. And it was not at all American in the way that he implemented a lot of things. But it is a black spot, of course, because for a very, geopolitical, very narrow-minded geopolitical perspective that makes no sense whatsoever, the West decided to go with the genociders. I mean, that's and actually, Mr. Kissinger even tried to press China into invade India just to avoid, the genociders to be punished. It was a disaster, and this, I mean, of course, you had, as I said, George Harrison, Joan Baez, the cultural pop world. Okay, and of course you had Ambassador Blood, the Blood Telegram, of course. But the institutions, they never came to terms with what they did. They never repented, and that's a problem. I mean, to the moment that they will have to agree, yes, we did a tremendous crime in 71. We should never have done that, to side with the genociders. To this moment, this original sin, we will have always a problem. That's what I meant, with this issue of the original sin, more of the West than anything else. Now, regarding Bangladesh, I mean, I have to confess that in 2015, I could not imagine that Jamaati Islami and Yunus, the power in Bangladesh, they would be able to recreate, it's the most perfect, transcription of George Orwell's 1984 novel into reality. they got everything and they put it upside down. Well, the International Crime Tribunal to start with, they put the lawyers of the defendants of the biggest crimes to adding the prosecution, and they prosecuted everyone that was mobilized for the punishment of the genocide. Sharia Kabir, for instance, that's a symbol, But I could speak about one of the prosecutors, Tapas Bol, that is now working with us in SADF. We are very honored to have him, as well, but so many others. And actually, this idea of having inventing millions of assassinations. I mean, there are millions of people that were fake accused of crimes. I mean, unbelievable, and you just go to a police station and you just feel 1,000 names. Oh, these 1,000 people, they contributed to the assassination of whoever that was assassinated, and sometimes was not. Never mind. I mean, the degree of invention of putting the reality upside down that is being done in Bangladesh, I actually do not know of any parallel. I mean, I think that George Orwell would be surprised himself.
Yeah, for sure. So, like you mentioned about 24 January, you are in Bangladesh. Was this the first time, or you have visited Bangladesh before?
No, I had been several times in Bangladesh.
Okay, so you must have seen the changes, what happened even in last 15, 20 years, because me, myself, I'm also out of the country for over 20 years. So I witness like every time, like the last time I went there probably like few years ago, but still every time I go there, I noticed the changes, not even in the cities, also in like rural areas. 99% people were getting the power, which was like a revolutionary considering the Bangladesh's economy. And over 15 years, Bangladesh saw continued like over 7% GDP growth. So, like, how do you see compare that, even considering democracy and like the all other situation, and after that, how it is portrayed? And last 15 months, is country is going downwards. Country is losing investment, losing over 70, I think, over 7 million jobs because hundreds of like industries, they are being destroyed, burned, and like politically manipulated in many different ways. Like, how do you compare that, considering that Sheikh Hasina, the accusation against her being corrupt, or her being the autocracy ruler, whereas Yunus is held by people, held by the West, some media like Al Jazeera, and like there are some other media as well. Like, I do not want to name everyone, but you understand that he is being held by the West in general for his work, even though people in Bangladesh, if you go now, you'll see how much they are suffering every day. So what is your opinion on that? Like, because my understanding is the European policymakers or the Western policymakers, they can have better engagement when it comes to South Asian democracies, and this is probably not the way to promote democracy. Like, I would like your opinion on that matter.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. I think it is only a matter of looking objectively and looking with your eyes open, of course, and wanting to see the reality. And it is quite obvious from whatever point of view, from the point of view of human rights, including minorities, including women rights, the dignity of women, the teaching, the freedom, the political democracy, and of course the development. I mean, there can be no comparison. We had a much better situation, and the West promoted an autocratic coup that is a tragedy for Bangladesh, a complete tragedy for Bangladesh people from whatever point of view, because there is not a single point of view from which you can say that, oh, but things are better now in Bangladesh. I mean, corruption, I mean, you just mentioned, Mr. Yunus, Mr. Yunus, the debtor, was forgiven by Mr. Yunus, the boss of the country. Okay, worse than this, I cannot imagine. So in terms of corruption, I mean, you just have to look at Mr. Yunus and everything is clear. I mean, you cannot imagine worse than this. The justice is a joke. The freedom of press, I mean, journalists are persecuted everywhere, in prison, and having to escape, and censorship. The situation is absolutely catastrophic. The economy, you mentioned it. I mean, the West, I mean, you mentioned Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera has actually acquired tremendous influence in the West. I mean, you see it fundamentally in the issue of Israel and Gaza. Actually, nearly every Western main media just repeats the absurdities, whatever Al Jazeera says, and I even, one of the things I wrote lately was on just nearly 2 years ago, one of the first histories on hospitals and massacres and so on and so on and so on. The Al Jazeera, Al Jazeera English made an interpretation mistake. It was not Hamas. Sometimes people say, "Oh no, Hamas." I mean, Hamas is a terrorist organization, but besides being a terrorist organization, I mean, it's making a war, and of course, it's trying to sell its point of view, obviously. I mean, but Al Jazeera English made a translation mistake from what the Hamas had said in Arabic and transformed injuries into fatalities. And you could see the whole of the international press repeating the same is the same mistake, but claiming that Hamas said it. Hamas did not say it. Al Jazeera did. So it is unbelievable how this press, that came out of revenue, because that's the problem we saw in the beginning. We do not have a free press. We have, of course, some spontaneous things. You have, for instance, free press. That's my I read free press from the United States as the most important reference, in terms of information. Okay, free press, it's a novel thing, but the traditional press that was based on selling a physical newspaper or selling an authorization for you to get into the video, and fundamentally publicity, it's dead, because its business model is dead, and so it must survive otherwise. And Qatar is and Al Jazeera, they are very generous. They claim that they formed hundreds of thousands of people, in the media, across the world in the last decades, and they might have done. You see, so this is the tragedy, is that we are not able to see the truth. We do not have strong, independent public opinion press that goes, look at the figures, look at the people, go there and to tell us what is the truth. That's the problem. So the West is being blind on the reality. Just 2 or 3 days ago, I saw a story in the Financial Times on corruption in the times of Sheikh Hasina. I'm sure there was corruption in the times of Sheikh Hasina. Do not doubt that. There is corruption everywhere, and of course, Bangladesh is not immune to it. I'm sure. But what is the sense of speaking about it? All this time after the coup, and not saying a word about Yunus. What is the sense of it? This is disinformation, pure disinformation, and we should not tolerate this.
Okay, so I would like to add something to that about the West influence. You must have aware about President Trump mentioning about $29 million that was funneled through USAID to Bangladesh, even though Bangladesh government denied that. The current government, they denied that. I would like to ask you on that matter, because to us, for what we understand is basically the money went, and that money was used to motivate people. And President Trump claimed that the USA, they actually, in his interview, who claimed, from your perspective, is there any credible sources that actually can help people, other than President Trump himself mentioning that Western involvement in the regime change, or ousting Sheikh Hasina from power? And what role do you see that the foreign NGOs and the governments, they play in Bangladesh?
No, yeah. I think President Trump said that freshly after starting his presidency. When he started, he made some movements trying to make the impression that he was going to shake completely the deep state. But actually, he didn't. He just only those people that were directly involved, in attacks against him. Some of them he did not pardon. But after sometimes he spoke about this, but he did not insist, and it did not develop, because it was obviously not only 29 million. Obviously not. The construction is much, much, much bigger. I saw myself only some parts of it. For instance, this organization that is called Bangladesh Transparency International.
Yes.
That was
Transparency International, yes.
Oh, this one, Actually, I thought it very funny. Yes. Because they were financed by US said, they said so, at least in 2024 when I was there in Bangladesh. and they were quoted, by diplomacy. Oh, they are very transparent, very objective. But then, you look at their site now. Oh, there is no U.S. ad, and it's whatever. Okay, but this organization that through their headquarters in the Netherlands and elsewhere, Transparency International, it's they are financed by the Soros machine, mostly by the Soros machine. I mean, they said what their report of the 2024 elections, what they say is absolutely impossible to have happened. I mean, I did say that, and I confirm. I mean, of course, there were problems. Obviously, you can name the problems, but what they did was they invented a lot of things that are absolutely impossible. This could not have happened the way they call it. And this is a clear example of this influence of trying to portray, to darken the image of Sheikh Hasina. You see, the reality, of course, is not that the Bangladesh authorities or the Awami League, or for that matter, whoever else in the world are angels and untouchable and did nothing wrong. Of course, this does not exist. You can always see things that are wrong everywhere. The problem is to put this to the perspective to which you see that. To put whatever is wrong, as when you want to tarnish the image as absolute and to hide what is right, and vice versa. That's the problem. Of course, that there were issues with these elections in 2024. Of course, there are. But the fundamental thing, that I think that's what, to me, it really breaks my heart to see what's going on in Bangladesh now. The fundamentals of democracy and a transparent system were there in Bangladesh. I mean, you had the possibility really of having a clear-cut democracy. Some things needed to be changed, but now you just destroy the whole of
Any
what
opportunity.
was yeah.
So
So
with
I
that, this is a report from Reuters actually that was published right after 5th August. You can see the dates is August 6, 2024, that the Bangladesh army refused to suppress the protest and sealing basically Sheikh Hasina's fate, what happened. And before that also, and after that, the reports came out, like, let's say, United Nations even threatened Bangladesh military, Bangladesh army, that if they help the government or Sheikh Hasina, they won't be allowed to go in United Nations missions, which is a big source, especially for Bangladesh army, because every time they go on a United Nations missions, they'll get big money. How do you see that, like, establishing democracy, utilizing like a militaries to like coup and oust government? Yes, there was question about the election. Yes, there was question about the human rights. Yes, there is question about like all these audicities people were accusing her that like is happening. But is this the solution? Is this the right way to motivate people, or use another country's army, what United Nations did? Which is surprising to me, because in my understanding, United Nations should be the organization to promote democracy, not to promote military coup like this.
Absolutely. I mean, it is a tragedy, and I think it is marking, the dissolution of the credibility of this international construction that we had since the Second World War. I mean, it's Bangladesh is, for me, it's the most scandalous example I know of, where the United Nations did everything wrong. Everything that is done on Bangladesh is absolutely erroneous. They actually pressed for the coup. They, even after the coup, they sided with Mr. Yunus. They never pressed him the way they should have pressed him for him to take the the measures you should take, which is fundamentally prepare elections. I mean, when you have a situation like that, an interim government, the program is to prepare elections and to allow for freedom of expression, for peaceful freedom of expression, and for law and order. That's all, and that's exactly the opposite of what was done. And the United Nations was absolutely complicit with this, and I was completely taken aback. I could not expect United Nations to have come so low as they did.
Thank you for the clear answer there. Mr. Kazaka, next question. My next question is related to the minority attacks still happening in Bangladesh on Hindus, Christians, and Buddhists after Sheikh Hasina left. And women's right, you are aware about the situation there. After dark, women are scared to go outside, or even during the daytime, there is like the situation happening that people are scared to live their normal life. Talking about freedom of speech, 42 journalists has been arrested. Some are even killed on the street by mobs because of their freedom of speech, what they are writing about. And this is probably the worst situation ever Bangladesh seen when it comes to freedom of speech, because even people like us, like who are in Bangladesh, they are not able to speak or say what they want to say, because next day there will be police or army on their door. What do you see in terms of how can Bangladesh recover from this situation, like when the entire government is taken over along with police and army?
No, I think that the Bangladesh Democrats and Patriots, they have to come together. They have to see that they have to recover their country. It's more now, of course, it's very important to see what was there before and that what there is there now. But we must see a way to get together to recover democracy in Bangladesh and recover the procedure that we had in place, because the way now is completely totalitarian. It's persecution of minorities, is complete destruction of all freedom of expression, is destruction of the rights of women. It's getting back, it's destruction of the economy, it's fanaticism, it's religious supremacism that cannot tolerate minority religions. It's really a tremendous disaster. Of course, to have a support of the external public opinion is fundamental. It's one of the battles that we have to come in, but there must be a strategy to come together to see how to make Bangladesh free. And this is mostly a task for the Bangladesh people.
Okay, so before we are towards the end of the discussion today, but before we go into the last question, I would like to get your opinion on Nepal, because what is happening in Nepal is not very many people are aware about it, and what's in their fate we still don't know, because things are evolving very fast. They still don't have a transition or a new government established yet. Which is very scary, considering that still the country is burning. From your perspective and your experience, and also you are the director of South Asian Democratic Forum, what advice do you have for people in Nepal?
Well, there is no question of having somebody from the outside of taking decisions for Nepalese. But I think that what the protesters have suggested, that is the former president of the Supreme Court to be nominated as the interim prime minister to organize elections is the best solution and should be agreed as soon as possible. And there should be a transitional government that should look at Bangladesh and say, we have to do exactly the opposite of what they did. Fundamentally, what will be necessary is to agree on peace, end of violence. That's the most important thing. I mean, in a state of violence where it's not possible to make whatever elections, democracy, whatever. A clear calendar for elections, constitutional elections if needed be, but a clear calendar and clear procedures for allowing the elections to be free and transparent, and at the same time, to think on ways what is wrong in the Nepalese democracy and how can it be improved. I think from this point of view, as I said in the beginning, a lot is common. It's not the same degree, but there is a lot in common between the dissatisfaction of the Nepalese people and a lot of the European people as well. And we have to think, how can we improve our democratic system? The answer is not to go to dictatorship. The answer must be to provide new mechanisms to allow people to feel themselves to be more represented. And this is the biggest challenge in Nepal and everywhere else. But this should be done immediately to stop the violence as the most important objective right now as we are speaking.
You mentioned about the constitution, and the same advice I got from Dr. Shirin Ebadi and Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. So how important it is to follow the constitution in Bangladesh then, because the current government itself is not constitutional. Even Dr. Yunus, his appointment is not constitutional, because Bangladesh constitution has some suggestions and recommendations for situation like what happened in 5th August, but that was not followed, and still it's not being followed. Instead, Yunus hired some US Bangladeshi officials to change the constitution that might work in his favor. So how important that is to maintain the constitution?
Well, you see, the issue more than maintaining or not maintaining the constitution, because I think that Shirin Ebadi, she agrees, I agree with her, that there must be a new constitution in Iran. I mean, the constitution in Iran is helpless. I mean, you cannot have a democracy with a constitution like the Iranian one. But the issue is that democracies, that's the most important distinctive factor of a democracy, is that a constitution has to be approved by the people. I mean, it's not by a cabinet of friends of Mr. Yunus that he gets from his business activities in the United States or elsewhere. Obviously, this is pure dictatorship. This is the definition of dictatorship. What he did regarding the constitution could not be clearer than this, and that's the opposite what needs to be done. If a constitution has to be if there is anything to be changed in the constitution, well, there must be a constitutional assembly elected by the people to do it. There is no other democratic way.
Thank you so much. So my last question today is looking ahead. Like, since there is influence, like not just in Bangladesh, in South Asia, there is influence from the West, and also there is interest from China and India to have their local power in place and established. So, at the same time, so what can people in countries like Bangladesh they do to navigate through this situation, and also what can we expect from European leaders, like especially from the European Union, being not very much involved directly but indirectly, influencing through those NGOs? Like, what can you expect from them moving forward?
Well, Bangladesh people has a major responsibility, and I think it's it's vital, for the Bangladesh people to find ways to fight against the present dictatorship. Regarding the West, I think I mean, I have my own, I have my own NGOs, but I'm very skeptical on the NGOs as being, by themselves the ways to do whatever. I think the most important thing is to have the truth. We don't have the truth. We don't have a press that is independent, that is capable of paying independent-minded people to go to Bangladesh to interview, to see, to look at the statistics, not being financed by Qatar, not coming out of the universities that are paid by Qatar. Really independent people that have high moral standards look at the situation and say the reality. It's as simple as that. We do not need, it's forget about the geopolitics, forget about everything else. Just open the eyes and see the reality. And the reality is that you had an imperfect government, uh, as governments are imperfect everywhere, but fundamentally driving the country into a good direction politically, socially, and economically. And now you have a disaster. You have dictatorship. You have an economic disaster. You have someone at the head of it that only is looking for his own interests. So you have, and Europe has a lot of responsibilities in there. One, the original, sin was exactly not looking at 71. So, you know, recognizing the genocide of 71, I insist, as I did in 2015, is crucial. It's crucial. Without doing it, you will not have a new political look at the country.
That's very insightful, and like, thank you so much. Like, I mean, I have learned a lot from you today too. Mr. Kasaga, thank you for sharing your insights on Bangladesh's, like, this is turbulent situation in political landscape, and the importance of accountability and minority rights, and also the broader geopolitical forces at play that I learned from you. Your decades of advocacy reminded us that the democracy is a constant work in progress, and we hope this conversation encourages our viewers today to think critically about the narratives they encounter and try to learn the truth and support effort towards justice and inclusive governments. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure, and I'm looking forward for a, a free, democratic, and solidar Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a country that is very much ingrained in my heart.